The alarm bells rang across Station Alpha 9 with a sound that made everyone stop what they were doing. Commander Do-hyun looked up from his morning coffee as the red lights started flashing on every screen around the bridge of the Iron Resolve. His ship was docked at the human frontier station for routine repairs when the emergency signal came through from deep space. "Captain, we have an incoming transmission from the Galactic Council," said Lieutenant Ye-jin as she worked at her station, with quick fingers moving over the controls. "It's marked as highest priority and it's coming from the Outer Rim territories." Do-hyun set down his cup and walked over to the main screen. The face that appeared was not human, but belonged to one of the Villani people who everyone knew as the smartest and most peaceful species in the galaxy. But this Villani looked scared and tired in ways that Do-hyun had never seen before from their kind. "This is Chancellor Cathara of the Villani Republic," the alien said with a voice that shook with fear. "We are sending this message to anyone who can receive it because our people are dying, and we do not know what else to do. Something terrible has come to our space. They call themselves the Void Hunters, and they are not like any enemy we have ever seen before." The screen showed images of destroyed cities that had once been beautiful crystal structures reaching toward the sky. Now they were twisted metal and broken glass scattered across dead planets. Do-hyun felt his hands tighten into fists as he watched the destruction. 17 of our colonies have been completely destroyed in the past 3 months, the Chancellor continued. "But they are not just killing us. They are taking our people away and we do not know why. Our defensive fleets cannot stop them. Their ships are unlike anything in our databases and their weapons cut through our shields like they are not even there." Lieutenant Ye-jin looked up from her station with worry in her eyes. "Captain, the timestamp on this message shows it was sent 6 days ago. If they're moving this fast?" Do-hyun nodded and turned back to the screen where the Chancellor was still speaking. "We have sent requests for help to the Galactic Council, but they say they need time to study the situation and form committees to discuss diplomatic solutions. We do not have time. Our homeworld has 12 billion people, and if these Void Hunters reach us, they will all die. Please, if anyone receives this message and has the power to help us, we are begging you to come. The coordinates of our last known enemy contact are included in this transmission." The screen went dark and the bridge was quiet for several seconds. Do-hyun could hear the normal sounds of the station outside their ship, but inside the Iron Resolve everyone was thinking about what they had just seen. "Sir," said Communications Officer Bora from her station near the back of the bridge, "I'm receiving a priority message from Earth Command. Admiral Kiwon wants to speak with you immediately." Do-hyun walked to his command chair and pressed the communication button. The screen flickered and showed the face of Admiral Kiwon, a man who had fought in more battles than anyone else in the human fleet. His gray hair and deep scars told stories of wars that most people preferred not to think about. "Do-hyun, I know you've seen the Villani transmission," the Admiral said without any greeting. "The Galactic Council is doing exactly what we expected them to do. They're talking while people die. But we're not going to sit here and watch another species get destroyed while bureaucrats argue about proper procedures." "What are your orders, sir?" Do-hyun asked, though he already knew what the answer would be. "I'm putting together Task Force Omega with the Iron Resolve as flagship. You'll have the Crimson Dawn under Captain Bora, the Storm's Edge with Captain Taeho, and the Silent Hunter commanded by Captain Hanul. 4 ships against an unknown enemy that's destroyed 17 colonies, but that's never stopped us before." Do-hyun smiled for the first time that morning. "How long do we have to prepare?" "You leave in 18 hours. The other ships are already moving to your position." "This isn't going to be easy, Do-hyun. From what we can see in the Villani data, these Void Hunters use technology that we don't understand, and tactics that seem designed to cause maximum fear. But there's something else." The Admiral paused and looked directly at Do-hyun through the screen. "Intelligence suggests that other species have encountered these Void Hunters before, but the records were classified or destroyed. This might not be the first time they've appeared in our galaxy, which means they could be much more dangerous than we initially thought." "Understood, sir. My crew will be ready." "I know they will. And Do-hyun, remember that every species in the galaxy will be watching this mission. They want to see if the humans from the Death World can do what their civilized fleets cannot. Don't disappoint them. The transmission ended and Do-hyun turned to face his crew. Lieutenant Ye-jin was already working on downloading the Villani data files. Communications Officer Bo-ra was coordinating with the other ships in the task force. Everyone was moving with the quick efficiency that came from years of working together in dangerous situations. "Attention all crew," Do-hyun said into the ship's communication system. "We have a new mission. In 18 hours we'll be leaving this station to help the Villani people against an enemy called the Void Hunters. I won't lie to you about what we're facing. This enemy has destroyed 17 colonies and taken millions of lives. They use weapons and ships that are unlike anything we've seen before. But we're going anyway because that's what we do." He paused and looked around the bridge, at the faces of his crew. These were people who had followed him through 3 major conflicts and dozens of smaller battles. They were human, which meant they came from a world that most aliens considered too dangerous for intelligent life. They had grown up with predators, and diseases and natural disasters that would terrify other species. But that same harsh world had made them into something that the galaxy was only beginning to understand. "The Galactic Council thinks diplomacy can solve every problem," Do-hyun continued. "They believe that if you talk long enough and form enough committees, even the worst enemies can be reasoned with. Maybe they're right about some enemies, but some enemies only understand one language, and we speak that language better than anyone else in this galaxy." The crew was quiet, but Do-hyun could see the determination in their eyes. They had heard stories about what happened to species that couldn't defend themselves. They had seen the results of waiting too long to act, while bureaucrats debated and enemies grew stronger. "We're going to show the Void Hunters what happens when they threaten innocent people while humans are watching. We're going to show the galaxy that sometimes the only way to stop monsters is to send bigger monsters after them. Prepare the ship for departure. We have work to do." As the crew went to their duties, Do-hyun looked out through the main view screen, at the stars. Somewhere out there, an ancient enemy was destroying peaceful worlds and taking millions of lives. The civilized species of the galaxy were forming committees and writing diplomatic protests. But Task Force Omega was going hunting. The 4 ships of Task Force Omega dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Serenity's rest system, and what they saw made even the battle-hardened human crew stop and stare. Where the Villani colony world should have been green and blue with crystal cities catching the light of its sun, there was now a brown and gray planet covered in smoke and twisted metal. Captain Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve and watched the sensor readings come in. "Report," he said to Lieutenant Ye-jin, who was working at the science station with her hands moving quickly over the controls. "Sir, I'm reading no life signs from the planet's surface," she said, with a voice that was trying to stay professional, but Do-hyun could hear the shock underneath. "The atmosphere is filled with toxic gases and the temperature readings show that something burned very hot across the entire surface. Whatever did this, they didn't just attack the cities. They burned everything." Captain Taeho's voice came through the communication system from the storm's edge. "Iron Resolve were detecting debris fields in orbit around the planet. It looks like the remains of the Villani defense satellites and maybe some civilian ships that tried to escape." Do-hyun looked at the tactical display where the debris was marked in red dots around the dead world. Each dot had been a ship full of people trying to run away from something terrible. "Take us into orbit. I want to see this up close. All ships, maintain full shields and keep weapons ready." As the Iron Resolve moved closer to the planet, the details became clearer and more horrible. The beautiful crystal spires that the Villani were famous for had been melted and twisted into shapes that hurt to look at. The cities that had once housed millions of people were now crater-filled wastelands where nothing could live. "Captain," said Chief Science Officer Ye-jin, "I'm detecting some unusual energy readings from the surface. It's like nothing in our databases. The pattern suggests some kind of harvesting technology, but I can't figure out what they were harvesting." "Let's go find out," Do-hyun said. "Prepare a landing party. I want Marines, scientists, and engineers. We need to understand what happened here if we're going to stop it from happening again." 2 hours later, Do-hyun was walking through what had once been the main city of Serenity's Rest, wearing a full environmental suit, and carrying enough weapons to fight a small war. With him were Marine Commander Woo Jin, Chief Science Officer, Ye Jin, and engineer Dong Wu. The other 3 ships were in orbit keeping watch for any signs of the enemy returning. The city was worse up close than it had looked from space. The ground was covered with a strange gray substance that their scanners couldn't identify. Where buildings should have been, there were only twisted metal frameworks that looked like they had been drained of everything that had once made them solid. "Sir," said engineer Dong Wu as he took readings with a handheld scanner, "I'm getting some very strange data here. The metal in these structures shows signs of having been partially converted into something else. It's like something was trying to change the atomic structure but stopped halfway through." Marine Commander Wu Jin was examining what had once been a Villani civilian vehicle. "Captain, you need to see this. There are organic residues here, but they're not normal biological remains. It's like something extracted all the living matter and left behind only trace elements." Chief Science Officer Ye Jin called out from where she was studying a large crater in the center of the city. "I've found the source of those energy readings. There's some kind of device buried here. It's not active now, but the energy signature suggests it was used to process large amounts of organic material very quickly." Do-hyun felt a cold feeling in his stomach as he began to understand what they were looking at. "Are you saying that these void hunters didn't just kill the colonists? They harvested them?" "That's exactly what I'm saying, sir," Ye Jin replied. "This device was designed to extract and process all organic matter in a wide area. The people, the plants, even the organic components in their technology. Everything was turned into some kind of raw material and taken away." The 4 humans stood in silence for several minutes as they thought about what this meant. Do-hyun had seen many battlefields in his career, but this was different. This wasn't war, it was farming. The void hunters treated intelligent species like crops to be harvested when they were ready. "Sir," Marine Commander Wu Jin said suddenly, "we're getting movement readings from the edge of the city. Something big is coming this way." Do-hyun activated his communication system to contact the ships in orbit. "Iron Resolve, this is the surface team. We need immediate pickup, and we need it now." Captain Bora's voice came through clearly from the Crimson Dawn. "Captain, we're detecting 3 unidentified ships approaching the system. They're not like anything in our databases, and they're moving fast." "All ships to combat readiness," Do-hyun ordered as he and his team ran toward their shuttle. "We're about to meet the void hunters." The first enemy ship that came into view was like something from a nightmare. It was huge, maybe twice the size of the Iron Resolve, but it didn't look like it had been built. It looked like it had been grown. The hull was a dark gray color that seemed to shift and move in the light, and there were organic-looking protrusions all along its length that pulsed with a sickly green glow. "All ships, this is Do-hyun," he said as his shuttle raced back toward the Iron Resolve. "Engage the enemy, but be careful. We don't know what their weapons can do." Captain Hanul spoke from the Silent Hunter. "Captain, these ships are not responding to any of our standard communication frequencies. They're just coming straight at us with no attempts at dialogue." The first Void Hunter ship opened fire with weapons that looked like streams of liquid metal moving through space. When they hit the Storm's Edge's shields, the energy barrier didn't just absorb the impact like it should have. Instead, the shield seemed to dissolve and the metal streams kept going, cutting deep gouges in the ship's armor. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Do-hyun shouted as his shuttle docked with the Iron Resolve. "Their weapons can cut through our standard defenses. We need to adapt our tactics." Captain Taeho's voice came through with the sound of alarms in the background. "Iron Resolve, the Storm's Edge has taken heavy damage to our primary systems. These weapons are like nothing we've faced before." Do-hyun reached the bridge and took command of his ship just as the second Void Hunter vessel opened fire on the Crimson Dawn. But Captain Bora was ready for them. Instead of trying to absorb the impact with shields, she ordered her ship to roll and use its thick armor plating to deflect the attack. "That's it," Do-hyun said as he watched the tactical display. "They're designed to counter standard defensive systems, but they might not be ready for old-fashioned armor and maneuverability. All ships, switch to evasive combat patterns and use kinetic weapons." The Iron Resolve launched a spread of missiles at the closest Void Hunter ship while moving, in a complex pattern that made it hard to target. The missiles hit the organic-looking hull and exploded, tearing huge holes in the enemy vessel. Green fluid poured out of the wounds like blood. "Sir," Lieutenant Yejin said from her station, "the enemy ships are reading as partially biological. They're not just machines, they're living creatures that have been turned into weapons." Captain Bora's voice came through the communication system with excitement. "All ships, I've got an idea. Wing Commander Jaewon, take your fighters and try ramming attacks on the damaged areas. If these things are alive, maybe we can kill them." Do-hyun watched in amazement as the small human fighters launched from the Crimson Dawn and flew straight at the wounded Void Hunter ship. Instead of trying to avoid the organic protrusions on the enemy hull, they aimed directly for them. When the fighters hit, the entire enemy ship convulsed like a living thing in pain. "It's working," Captain Hanul reported from the Silent Hunter. "The biological components seem to be connected to their primary systems. If we can damage enough of them, we might be able to disable these ships." The battle lasted for 2 hours, and when it was over, all 3 Void Hunter ships were dead and drifting in space. But Task Force Omega had learned something that would change everything. These enemies weren't just using advanced technology. They were using living ships that could think and adapt, and they treated all other life as nothing more than raw material for their expansion. As the human ships began salvage operations on the enemy vessels, Do-hyun looked at the dead world below and thought about the 12 billion Villani civilians on their homeworld. If the Void Hunters were willing to harvest an entire species like crops, then this was just the beginning of something much worse. The massive Void Hunter fleet came out of hyperspace like a plague of metal and flesh descending on the Villani homeworld. Captain Do-hyun watched from the bridge of the Iron Resolve as over 200 enemy ships appeared on his sensors, each one larger and more terrifying than the scouts they had fought at Serenity's Rest. "Sir," Lieutenant Yejin said with her voice tight with controlled fear, "I'm counting 217 enemy vessels. The smallest ones are twice our size, and some of the larger ones are reading as over 10 kilometers long." "Admiral," Kiwan's voice came through the communication system from the Fleet Command Center on Earth, thousands of light years away. "Task Force Omega, you are authorized to engage under Deathworld Doctrine. The Galactic Council's response fleet is still 3 days out, and the Villani have maybe 6 hours before their orbital defenses fall completely." Do-hyun looked at his tactical officer, Commander In-ho, who was already working on battle plans that most alien species would consider insane. Deathworld Doctrine was something that humans had developed after years of fighting enemies who outnumbered them and outgunned them. It was based on the simple idea that sometimes the only way to win was to do things that no rational being would attempt. "All ships, this is Do-hyun," he said into the communication system. "We're going in against impossible odds to buy time for 12 billion innocent people. The enemy thinks they're harvesting another defenseless species, but they're about to learn what happens when Deathworlders decide to fight." On the main screen, the first wave of Void Hunter ships was already engaging the Villani orbital defense platforms. The beautiful crystalline structures that had been built for peace and protection were being torn apart by organic weapons that seemed designed to cause maximum suffering. Green streams of liquid metal cut through the defenses while smaller Void Hunter vessels began descending toward the planet's surface. Captain Bora's voice came from the Crimson Dawn. "Iron Resolve, I'm launching all fighters. Wing Commander Jaewon has a plan that's either brilliant or completely crazy." "With our odds, those are the same thing," Do-hyun replied, as he watched dozens of small human fighters stream toward the massive enemy fleet. "All ships execute Deathworld Protocol 7. We're going to show these things what humans do when we're cornered." The Iron Resolve accelerated toward the center of the Void Hunter formation, while launching every missile and torpedo in its arsenal. But instead of aiming for the enemy ships directly, Commander In-ho was targeting the spaces between them, creating massive explosions that would damage multiple vessels at once. Captain Tae-ho in the Storm's Edge was doing something that would have gotten him court-martialed in any other fleet. He was using his ship as a kinetic weapon, ramming into the organic protrusions on enemy hulls at maximum speed, and then using his ship's momentum to tear massive wounds in their living armor. "Storm's Edge, your hull integrity is down to 40%, Lieutenant Yejin reported from her station. "You can't keep doing that." "Watch me," Tae-ho replied as his ship carved another huge gash in a Void Hunter cruiser. "These things bleed. which means they can die. Captain Hanul's Silent Hunter was using stealth technology in ways that its designers never intended. Instead of staying hidden and launching surprise attacks, she was cloaking her ship just long enough to get inside the enemy formation, then detonating her entire missile payload at point-blank range before cloaking again and moving to a new position. The battle was chaos in a way that most alien species couldn't understand. Human ships were everywhere at once, appearing and disappearing, ramming and exploding and fighting with a desperation that seemed to make them stronger instead of weaker. The Void Hunters had expected to face another peaceful species with orderly defensive fleets and predictable tactics. Instead, they were fighting an enemy that treated every battle like a fight for survival. Wing Commander Jawan's fighters were doing something that violated every rule of space combat. Instead of trying to avoid the organic weapons fire from the enemy ships, they were flying directly into it and using the liquid metal streams as guidance systems to find the most vulnerable parts of the Void Hunter vessels. "Sir," Communications Officer Bora said from her station, "I'm receiving a transmission from the Villani Chancellor on the planet's surface. She wants to know what our casualty projections are." Du Yun looked at the tactical display where the Iron Resolve was surrounded by enemy ships that were each large enough to destroy his vessel with a single hit. His shields were down to 20%, his armor was cracked in a dozen places, and his weapon systems were running on backup power. "Tell her that humans don't make casualty projections," he said as he ordered his ship to ram straight into the largest Void Hunter vessel in the area. "We just fight until we win, or until there's nobody left to fight." The Iron Resolve's armored prow punched through the organic hull of the enemy ship like a spear through flesh. Green blood poured out of the wound as the human battleship pushed deeper into the living vessel, firing all weapons directly into its internal organs. Engineer Dongwu's voice came over the internal communication system. "Captain, the enemy ship's biological systems are trying to seal around our hull. If we stay here much longer, we're going to be trapped inside this thing." "Then we better make this count," Do-hyun replied as he ordered all remaining missiles to be fired directly into the creature's brain center. "All hands brace for emergency separation." The Iron Resolve tore itself free from the dying Void Hunter ship, just as the creature's death throes sent shockwaves through the entire enemy formation. 3 smaller enemy vessels were caught in the convulsions and crushed like insects. But the victory came at a terrible cost. The Storm's Edge was burning and drifting, its hull cracked open like an eggshell. Captain Taeho's voice came through the communication system one last time. "All ships, this is Taeho. My ship is lost, but we're taking one of the big ones with us. Tell the galaxy that the Storm's Edge went down fighting." Do-hyun watched in horror and pride as his friend's ship accelerated toward the largest Void Hunter vessel in the fleet. The Storm's Edge hit the enemy at full speed, and both ships disappeared in a ball of fire that could be seen from the planet's surface. "Sir," Lieutenant Yejin said quietly, "we've lost contact with the Storm's Edge, but the enemy formation is breaking up. They're pulling back toward the edge of the system." Do-hyun looked at the tactical display and saw that she was right. The Void Hunter fleet was retreating, but it wasn't a victory. They had saved the Villani homeworld for now, but the enemy would be back with more ships and better tactics. And Task Force Omega was down to 3 damaged vessels against an enemy that numbered in the thousands. Captain Hanul's voice came from the Silent Hunter, which was so badly damaged that it was barely holding together. "All ships, I'm reading massive energy signatures from deep space. The main Void Hunter fleet is still out there and they're calling for reinforcements." "How long do we have?" Do-hyun asked. "Maybe 6 hours before they come back with everything." "They've got," Hanul replied. "And when they do, there won't be anything left of this system but raw materials for their expansion." Do-hyun looked around his damaged bridge at the crew who had followed him into impossible odds and somehow survived. They were hurt and tired, and facing an enemy that seemed endless, but there was something in their eyes that the Void Hunters would never understand. It was the same thing that had allowed their species to survive on a death world where everything was trying to kill them. It was the refusal to give up even when giving up was the only logical choice. "All ships, begin emergency repairs," he ordered. "We've got 6 hours to get ready for the real fight." As the human ships limped toward the Villani orbital repair stations, Do-hyun thought about the message that Admiral Kiwan had sent with their orders. The galaxy was watching to see if humans could do what civilized species could not. They had won the first round, but the real test was still coming. And when it arrived, Task Force Omega would be ready to show the universe what Deathworlders could do when they stopped holding back. The main Void Hunter fleet arrived exactly 6 hours later, like a living nightmare emerging from the darkness between stars. Captain Do-hyun stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve and watched as nearly 1,000 enemy ships materialized in the outer system, each one pulsing with organic light and hungering for the 12 billion lives on the planet below. "Sir," Lieutenant Ye-jin said as her fingers worked frantically over the sensor controls, "I'm reading 943 enemy vessels. Some of them are over 20 kilometers long, and the energy signatures suggest they're much more advanced than the ones we fought before." The repairs to Task Force Omega had been rushed and incomplete. The Iron Resolve's armor was patched with Vellani crystal compounds that were stronger than human steel, but had never been tested in combat. The Crimson Dawn had replaced half her fighter squadrons with Vellani pilots who had volunteered to die fighting, rather than be harvested. The Silent Hunter was held together with emergency welds and prayer. Admiral Kiwan's voice came through the long-range communication system from Earth. "Do-hyun, the Galactic Council fleet is still 18 hours away. You're facing impossible odds with 3 ships against 1,000. Nobody would blame you for withdrawing to save your crews." Do-hyun looked around his bridge at the faces of his officers. Lieutenant Ye-jin was young and brilliant, and had her whole life ahead of her. Communications Officer Bo-ra had a family waiting for her back on Earth. Engineer Dong-woo had children who would grow up without a father if he died here. But in their eyes, he saw the same decision he had already made. "Admiral, we didn't come this far to run away when things got hard," Do-hyun replied. "The Vellani people are counting on us, and we're not going to let them down. Task Force Omega will engage the enemy." Captain Bo-ra's voice came from the Crimson Dawn. "All ships, I'm converting my hangar bays into weapons manufacturing stations. If we're going to die here, we're going to take as many of these things with us as possible." The first wave of Void Hunter ships began moving toward the planet, while the larger vessels stayed back to coordinate the attack. These weren't the chaotic swarm tactics they had faced before. This was a coordinated assault by an enemy that had learned to respect human unpredictability. "Sir," Commander In-ho said from the tactical station, "the enemy is using formation patterns designed to counter our ramming attacks and close-quarters combat. They've adapted to our methods." "Then we adapt faster," Do-hyun said as he studied the enemy formations. "All ships implement Deathworld Protocol Omega. We're going to show them what humans do when adaptation isn't enough." Deathworld Protocol Omega was the most desperate tactic in human military doctrine. It involved using the ship's entire structure as a weapon, overloading every system to maximum output and fighting with the understanding that survival was less important than completing the mission. Most alien species considered it a form of ritualized suicide. Humans called it Tuesday. The Iron Resolve accelerated toward the center of the enemy formation, while every system on the ship began operating far beyond safe parameters. Engineer Dong-woo's voice came over the internal communication system. "Captain, I'm reading massive electromagnetic interference from the enemy ships. Their biological components are generating some kind of field that's disrupting our targeting systems." "Then, we target manually," Do-hyun replied as he took direct control of the ship's weapons. "Ye-jin, I need you to find a weakness in their electromagnetic field. There has to be something we can exploit." Chief Science Officer Ye-jin worked at her station with the concentrated focus that came from knowing that 12 billion lives depended on her findings. "Sir, I've found something. The electromagnetic field they're generating uses frequencies that would be lethal to most organic species. But humans from a high-radiation environment like Earth should be able to tolerate much higher levels." "Are you saying we can use their own weapons against them?" Do-hyun asked. "Not exactly, sir. But if we overload our communication arrays to broadcast on the same frequency, we might be able to disrupt their biological systems. The radiation levels would kill most aliens, but we should be able to survive long enough to make it work." Captain Hanul's voice came from the Silent Hunter. "Iron Resolve, I'm reading your plan through the tactical network. My ship is too damaged to survive the radiation exposure. but I can get close enough to plant charges on their command vessel before the field kills my crew. Do-hyun felt his heart sink as he realized what his friend was volunteering to do. Han-Nul, there has to be another way. There is no other way, Do-hyun. My ship is already dying and my crew knows it. Let us make our deaths count for something. The Silent Hunter broke from formation and accelerated toward the largest Void Hunter vessel, while Captain Bo-Ra's fighters provided cover. Marine Commander Woo Jin's voice came through the communication system from where he was leading boarding parties onto enemy ships. All ships, we've discovered something important. The Void Hunters aren't just using organic technology. They are organic technology. Each ship is a single massive creature that's been modified for war. If we can damage their central nervous systems, we can shut down entire vessels. Do-hyun watched the tactical display as human Marines fought hand-to-hand combat inside living enemy ships that were trying to digest them while they planted explosives in vital organs. It was the kind of warfare that most civilized species couldn't even imagine. But humans had grown up on a world where everything was trying to eat them. "Sir," Lieutenant Yejin said suddenly, "I'm detecting massive power fluctuations from the enemy command ship. Captain Han-Nul's charges must have damaged something critical." The largest Void Hunter vessel began to convulse and emit streams of green fluid as the Silent Hunter's antimatter charges detonated inside its brain center. The electromagnetic field that had been disrupting human targeting systems flickered and began to fail. "All ships, now's our chance," Do-hyun ordered as he brought the Iron Resolve's weapons online. "Target their neural clusters and fire everything we have." The Iron Resolve and Crimson Dawn opened fire with every weapon they possessed while Wing Commander Jae-won's fighters dove into the chaos of the enemy formation. The human ships fought with a desperation that seemed to give them strength beyond their design specifications. Engineer Dongwoo's voice came from the engineering section, where he was performing miracles with damaged systems. "Captain, I'm detecting feedback in the enemy's biological network. When we damage one ship, it seems to affect others in the formation. They're all connected somehow. Then we keep hitting them until the whole network falls apart," Do-hyun said as his ship shuddered under enemy fire. "All Marines continue boarding operations. If these things are all connected, maybe we can use that against them." Marine Commander Woo Jin and his teams were fighting battles inside enemy ships that looked like the inside of massive animals. They moved through corridors that were actually arteries, planted explosives on walls that were really flesh, and fought enemy defenders that were part of the ship itself. "Sir," Woo Jin reported from inside a dying Void Hunter cruiser, "We've found what looks like a central processing unit. It's some kind of biological computer that connects this ship to others in the fleet. If we can hack into it, we might be able to turn their own network against them." "Do it," Do-hyun ordered as his ship took another hit that knocked out half the bridge systems. "Whatever you're going to do it fast. We can't take much more of this." The battle raged for another hour as human ships and crews fought with a ferocity that surprised even themselves. When Marine Commander Woo Jin finally managed to hack into the Void Hunter biological network, the results were immediate and devastating. Enemy ships began turning on each other as their shared consciousness became confused about which vessels were friends and which were enemies. But the victory came at a terrible price. The Silent Hunter was gone, taking Captain Han-Nul and her entire crew with her. The Crimson Dawn was so badly damaged that Captain Bo-Ra had to evacuate most of her personnel to the Iron Resolve. And the Iron Resolve itself was barely holding together, kept functional only by Engineer Dongwoo's refusal to let his ship die. As the surviving Void Hunter ships retreated into hyperspace, Do-hyun looked at the casualty reports and wondered if they had won or just delayed the inevitable. But then Chancellor Kethara's voice came through from the planet's surface. "Task Force Omega, this is the Villani Republic. Our long-range sensors show that the enemy fleet is in full retreat. You have saved 12 billion lives today and we will never forget what you have done for us." Do-hyun sat in his damaged command chair and thought about the cost of their victory. They had proven that humans could fight enemies that terrified the rest of the galaxy. But they had also shown that such victories required sacrifices that most species weren't willing to make. The galaxy was watching, and now they knew what Deathworlders could do when they stopped holding back. The news of the Battle of SciFiPrime spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by subspace communication networks to every inhabited world. Captain Do-hyun sat in the medical bay of the Iron Resolve, having his wounds treated, while listening to the reports coming in from across known space. "Sir," Lieutenant Ye-jin said as she entered the medical bay with a datapad in her hands, "the galactic news networks are calling it the most brutal space battle in recorded history. 4 human ships held off nearly 1,000 enemy vessels for over 24 hours and won." Do-hyun winced as the medical robot sealed a cut on his forehead. Through the small porthole, he could see the wreckage of Void Hunter ships drifting in space around the Vellani homeworld. Each piece of debris represented creatures that had once been alive, turned into weapons of war by something even more terrible than themselves. Admiral Kiwan's face appeared on the wall screen, transmitted from Earth Command. The old warrior looked tired but proud as he spoke. "Do-hyun, the Galactic Council has been in emergency session for the past 6 hours. They want to offer you and your crew the highest honors they can bestow, but more importantly, they want to put humanity in charge of the Anti-Void Hunter Coalition." "What does that mean exactly, sir?" Do-hyun asked as he stood up and walked to the window where he could see the planet below. 12 billion Vellani were alive because 3 human ships had been willing to fight impossible odds. It means that every species in the galaxy now understands that peaceful diplomacy can't stop some enemies. Chancellor Cathara has formally requested that Earth take military command of all coalition forces. The other species will provide ships and resources, but they want human officers making the tactical decisions. Do-hyun thought about Captain Tae-ho, who had died ramming his ship into an enemy vessel. He thought about Captain Hanul, who had sacrificed herself and her crew to save billions of strangers. He thought about Marine Commander Woo Jin, who was still in the medical bay recovering from wounds he received fighting inside living enemy ships. What about the other species, sir? How are they reacting to having the Deathworlders in charge of their military? Admiral Kiwan smiled grimly. "Some of them are grateful. The Vellani have declared you and your crew to be heroes of their republic, but others are scared. The Altarian Confederation released a statement saying that human combat methods are too extreme for civilized warfare. The Centauri Union is worried that we'll start solving every problem with violence." "And what did you tell them?" Do-hyun asked. "I told them that if they want to handle the next Void Hunter attack with diplomacy and committee meetings, they're welcome to try. But when the monsters come crawling out of the dark spaces between stars, they should probably call the people who know how to fight monsters." Engineer Dong-woo entered the medical bay with grease on his hands and satisfaction on his face. "Captain, I've finished the damage assessment on the Iron Resolve. We lost 60% of our armor plating. Both primary weapon systems are running on backup power and the main engine needs complete replacement. But she's still flying and she's still ready to fight." "How long for full repairs?" Do-hyun asked. "With Vellani assistance and their advanced crystal technology, maybe 3 weeks. But sir, I've been working with their engineers and I think we can make some improvements. Their energy shielding systems combined with our armor plating could make us nearly indestructible." Captain Bora's voice came through the communication system from the Crimson Dawn. "All ships, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Outer Rim territories. Another species is under attack by Void Hunter scouts." Do-hyun felt his muscles tense as he realized that their victory at SciFiPrime had only been the beginning. "What species?" "The Ethereal Collective, sir. They're a peaceful race that specializes in art and philosophy. They have no military, and no experience with violence of any kind. The Void Hunters are treating them like a harvesting ground." Admiral Kiwan's expression became serious. "Do-hyun, your ships aren't ready for another major engagement. The Galactic Council is assembling a response fleet, but it will take weeks to organize and deploy." "How long do the Ethereals have?" Do-hyun asked. "Maybe 72 hours before the main Void Hunter force arrives at their homeworld." Do-hyun looked around the medical bay at the faces of his crew. They were wounded and tired, and their ships were held together with emergency repairs and determination. But in their eyes, he saw the same thing he felt in his own heart. They were human, which meant they came from a world that had tried to kill them every day of their lives. They had survived by being tougher and more stubborn than anything that wanted to eat them. "Sir," Lieutenant Yejin said quietly, "the crew has been talking. We know the ships aren't ready, and we know the odds are even worse than they were here, but the ethereals have never hurt anyone in their entire history. They don't even understand the concept of violence. If we don't help them, who will?" Engineer Dongwu nodded in agreement. "Captain, I can have the Iron Resolve combat ready in 12 hours if I push the repairs. It won't be pretty and it won't be safe, but it will be enough to fight." Captain Bora's voice came through the communication system again. "Sir, the Crimson Dawn is ready to go whenever you give the order. My pilots are already volunteering for the mission." Duyun looked out the porthole at the wreckage of the enemy fleet they had destroyed. The galaxy was full of peaceful species who had never learned to fight because they had never needed to. But now something ancient and hungry had awakened in the dark spaces between stars, and those peaceful species needed someone who understood violence on a level that most civilized beings couldn't comprehend. "Admiral, we're going to help the ethereals," Do-hyun said. "I know our ships aren't ready, and I know we're asking our crews to risk everything again, but that's what Deathworlders do. We fight the things that other species can't fight." Admiral Ki-won was quiet for several seconds. "Do-hyun, if you do this, there's no going back. The galaxy will expect humans to be the ones who answer every distress call and fight every impossible battle. We'll become the monsters that other species call when they need monsters killed." "Maybe that's what we were always meant to be, sir. Maybe that's why we survived on a death world when any sensible species would have gone extinct. The universe needed something that could fight the things that live in the dark." "Very well, Captain. Task Force Omega is authorized to proceed to ethereal space. But Do-hyun, remember that the whole galaxy is watching. Show them what Deathworlders can do." As the communication ended, Do-hyun turned to face his crew. They were humans from Earth, a world that most aliens considered too dangerous for intelligent life. They had grown up with predators and diseases and natural disasters that would terrify other species. But that same harsh world had made them into something unique in the galaxy. "All hands, this is the captain," Do-hyun announced over the ship's communication system. "We have a new mission. The Ethereal Collective is under attack by Void Hunter forces and they need our help. Our ships are damaged and our crews are exhausted, but we're going anyway because that's what we do." He paused and looked around the EO medical bay at the wounded crew members who were already trying to get back to their duties. The galaxy is learning what it means to have Deathworlders as allies. They're learning that when peaceful species are threatened, they can call on people who understand that sometimes violence is the only answer to violence. Engineer Dongwu stood up and headed for the door. "I better get back to work, sir. These repairs won't finish themselves." Lieutenant Yejin gathered her data pads. "I'll start analyzing everything we know about ethereal space, sir. If we're going to save another species, we need to understand what we're walking into." As his crew dispersed to their duties, Do-hyun remained at the porthole looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, an ancient enemy was hunting peaceful beings who had never learned to fight back. The civilized species of the galaxy were forming committees and writing diplomatic protests. But Task Force Omega was going hunting. The galaxy had created a reputation for humanity that would follow them for generations. They were the savage fleet that answered distress calls with violence and brutality. They were the Deathworlders who fought monsters in the dark spaces between stars. And when other species whispered about the humans who had turned warfare into an art form, they would remember that sometimes salvation came not from the enlightened, but from those willing to become monsters to protect those who could not protect themselves. As the Iron Resolve began its journey toward ethereal space, Do-hyun thought about the future that awaited humanity. They would be called upon to fight every impossible battle and face every nightmare that emerged from the darkness. But they would answer those calls because that was what Deathworlders did. They fought so that others could live in peace.